time. Hello and welcome to Into the Liminal Abyss Paranormal Podcast. I am your show host, Shetan Noir, and today I am speaking with a Michigan native. We're both here from the great state of Michigan, surrounded by the Great Lakes. And our topic today will be Bigfoots and cryptozoology. So please welcome my guest, Blake, to the show. And Blake, what is your background and how did you become interested in cryptozoology?
Hey, my background is actually Bigfoot research. When I was a little kid, I got started from stories from my dad about the Patterson film, and then I was watching programs on the History Channel, and around the age of 12 and 13, I started going out in the woods, and I had my first encounter. And ever since then, 16 or so years later, I've been researching constantly here in this great state of Michigan, and I've had a number of encounters, and so that's basically. I've researched other cryptids and stuff along the way, but Bigfoot is my favorite.
So now, how many encounters have you had, and was it all with the same individual, or do you think it was different?
Definitely different. I've had. I don't really have a number because some are like wood knocks, some are vocals. I've never seen one, but I've had very close encounters of my first one when I was 13. That was kind of basically bluff charged. I'll go into that here in a second. But other times I heard them talking and stuff. So I would say probably 20 or so incidents. I found a number of tracks and stuff too, so it's kind of hard to say. But across the state of Michigan, actually, lower Michigan, here in the Farm Belt, where you wouldn't think Sasquatches would be, there's actually a lot. So I've had many encounters with different, tribes or individuals. But lately, I've been working a piece of land for about 5 or 6 years now, and those are definitely the same individuals that I've been hearing wood knocks and other things.
Now, you're from the Battle Creek area, which is in the if people don't get it, then most of us from Michigan, if you ask us where we live, we hold up our hand because Michigan is the bitten state,
Yeah.
and we point to the location of the map on our hand. So location wise, you would be in the lower. You're actually lower in the state than I am because I'm up in the Brighton area. So you're southwest of me.
Okay.
And most people think.
Yeah, actually. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no. Most people think that the Bigfoot activity happens in the upper part of the state, where they think it's all farms and forest. And here's the thing: if there's farms around you, if there's any type of fruit orchards, if there's any places that herds of deer go to eat and migrate to, then you have the potential for a Bigfoot or a dogman creature to be in that location because they are one of the apex predators that hunts on deer. So if you have deer herds in your area, I don't care where you live, but if you have deer in that area, then you have the potential for Bigfoots, to be there.
Oh yes, definitely. I've lived around the state, like I said. I'm actually not currently in Battle Creek. That's just what I have on my profile because I've experienced some stalking issues before with some disgruntled people. So I changed it around. But I can tell you that the areas around Battle Creek, they definitely have them. I've had encounters there. And lower Michigan, like you were saying, it doesn't seem like it's a place for these creatures to be. But you have to realize that modern people don't go outside at night. I mean, usually they're in bed at 10 watching TV. So they're
Right.
not roaming the woods at night. That's a whole time for them to be roaming around, collecting, gathering, and hunting. But on top of that, most people aren't in the woods here in Michigan or anywhere. They're working. They got family life, and when they do go out in the woods, they're not going as far and deep into the swamps as they can. So it's actually very easily, the Sasquatch are easily able to hide in Michigan. And when corn's up and stuff, they're sitting in the middle of those cornfields eating corn and picking off anything that's roaming through.
Right.
I mean, the only people going through those cornfields are the farmers and or big equipment, and you could easily get out of the way. And I know for a fact there's dozens and dozens of people here in Michigan that have had a number of encounters right next to houses, in between houses. I mean, out here in the country, it's the country. We got cornfields and woods and swamps, but there's a lot of houses here too.
Mm-hmm.
But in between, they live on the roads, and the roads you make up a big square, and the woods and swamp are in the middle. And so all the Sasquatch have to do is just cross the road in between houses, and then they get to one chunk of land to the other.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of people have the misconception when you say you're from Michigan, they immediately assume that Detroit takes up the whole lower portion of the state, and then they've heard about Frankenmuth. So there's this Christmas store that takes up the middle part of the state, and then Mackinac Island City way at the top, and then Flint's thrown in there too because of the water issue.
Right.
So people,
Yep.
they tend to think that those cities take up the whole portion of the state, and it's no. Detroit is the Motor City, and it's huge, but it doesn't take up the whole state. There are once you get like Novi area going to the west,
Oh, yeah.
and then I want to say probably like Rochester Hills, Troy area going north, you're suddenly opening up into vast portions of farmland and wooded area. And, people think Michigan, when they hear Michigan, they hear Detroit Motor City, and that's fine. But on the other hand, the farms and the forests take up more area than what anything else does.
Yeah, exactly. Michigan is actually 50% forest, and that's a lot of people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that most of the state is forested, and we, like you were saying earlier, we have massive deer herds. I mean, at one time, living at a place in the country, I just happened to glance out the window, and there was a stampede of deer hood, and I counted 150, and then I stopped counting,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I had noticed it. It was. I wish I had took video. It was amazing, and so there's plenty of resources, and we have a lot of swampland and marshes that provide a lot of water and wildlife that habit those areas for them to eat off of, and most people don't go in there. Only hunters, and if you're wildlife researchers and or fishermen, but the average Joe person don't go off trails, and they
Right.
they don't go outside their house. And even in Detroit, there's reports of Sasquatch on the fringes of the rundown places, and
Yep.
I guess over by the airports, there's yells being heard.
And a lot of people, I guess the mindset is, okay, we're gonna go out and experience nature, so they'll go to like the metro parks, which have these grooved pathways. There's you're seeing people every 5 minutes. So that's the extent of their hiking. They're not going out on like the wooded trails in the state forests and in the national forests. Around the state, or even up into the UP, where you can hike for miles without seeing another person. That's more of
Yeah,
a diehard,
exactly.
hiking person, who really likes nature or is really into Bigfooting, and is going out there to look. So most people don't venture off of that concrete path of a sidewalk, or a groomed trail, and which is probably good because
Yeah,
a
exactly.
lot more people would go missing. But
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Even in the state forest and national forest, most people are going to be on the trails. If you go off trail, you're either camping, or you're practicing survival techniques, or you're hunting, or like I said, you're researching wildlife. But the general average Joe, even if they're all prepared for hiking, they're staying on the trail. So there's a lot of places, even here in Lower Michigan, uh, where Sasquatch can be. There's a lot of private property where people just can't, go walking up into to research. And there's a lot of places where I think the Sasquatches realize there's an old lady living there and she owns a bunch of property and no one goes on their property. They're going to gravitate towards areas like that. But they can be very close to people's habitation. It's amazing how close they are actually getting here in Lower Michigan. But that's the only way they can survive. There's if if they're trying to live like out west where there's miles and miles of wilderness, or in the UP, they don't have to worry about people. There would be no place for them here in Lower Michigan, but they're right up against people's backyards.
yeah, I know
Um,
the now I don't know how far you are away from the Pinckney Rec area, recreation.
Not too far. Been there.
Okay,
Yep.
because there have been numerous reports coming out of that area of Bigfoot activity, and then I know Chuck has told me that he has seen activity, um, like in the Milford, South Line area at the Metro Parks there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a state park and then there's a metro park pretty much across the expressway from each other. And I know that he's gone out, walking the trails in the woods there, and he's seen different activities. So, within those two locations, the Pinckney Rec area, recreational, state park, and then Kensington Metro Park and Island Lakes, state park. Uh, yes, these are huge wooded areas, but there's pretty good sized towns skirting all around it, and so
Yeah, there are.
these the
Yep.
but the key thing is all three of these locations have wildlife. They have large bodies of water. Some of them have streams running through them, and
Mm-hmm.
there are groomed trails, but there are the woods areas are thick pockets of woods. So and then the woods extends out into different areas, surrounding neighborhoods and stuff like that. So there is plenty of area for something to hide and make a living, um, without ever being seen.
Oh yes, definitely. And I think all those areas have had a history of sightings. I know one of them has for sure. And but around that area, like the Whitemoor Lake area has had a lot of sightings over the years,
Mm-hmm.
like past 100 years. The history goes back 100 years of we have the Monroe monster from the 60s, I believe, and
Yes.
the Muskegon monster sightings from late 60s, and there's definitely a period of sightings up there and stuff. So people have been seeing these creatures in Michigan for a while now, and you don't have to go far. Like I said, you don't have to go up to the wilderness and up in the UP to find them, because they're I think they're plentiful down here. And the reason is, Michigan is a pretty fantastic state. We have a lot of water here besides the Great Lakes. You're never more than 4 miles from any body of water,
Pretty much, yeah.
so at any one time from a river or a stream or a little pond or a bit, a bigger lake. So we have plenty of water. And we do, and like I said, 50% of the state is covered in forest. And with the private land and farmland, with people not going, there's a lot of places they can still hide. Because they hide, and they watch, the dwellings around them, and they learn the habits of, say, the farmer, and they know that what particular season he's going hunting, or he's in the cornfield, or he's doing this and doing that. They work around it to stay hidden, and maybe they steal. They're caught stealing grains and all that. Because they seem to be interested in us, definitely curious, and they watch us, so they take the opportunity to get what they need and hide where they need to.
Yeah, and I do think that they are migratory. They will spend different seasons in different areas, um, particularly following the deer herds. But in Michigan, usually from, I want to say, June to end of September is when you have like the fruits and the vegetables are available, because that's our growing season is
Mm-hmm.
from late May to September. And so during the early part of the summer, they might be harvesting berries and stuff like that that are the wild sourced that are growing naturally. But then like usually in July, August, September is when the fruit trees start bearing their fruit. And I know just from personal experience here on my property, we have two mulberry trees. We have a small orchard that we put in with apples and peaches and stuff like that. But we have two mulberry trees, and it's always a race when the mulberries start to get ripe of what gets to them first, me or the wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a day late, trying to harvest those, the wildlife has picked it clean, because they watch it too. So if squirrels and birds are intelligent enough to know when the fruits are available to eat, then something higher functioning like a Bigfoot is definitely going to know, and they're going to make use of those advantages where food's available.
Yeah, exactly. And they can eat a lot more things that we can't. There's these swamp berries. Basically, it's a bush that grows in the swamp, and it has a berry, and wildlife can eat it, but it's too harsh for our stomach. And those are in places where I've had activity, and there was this one spot where it's like a wall. It's a wall of these plants, and they produce berries. It's in the swamp, and on the other side, it was an island of where you could sit and just relax. And this is right behind the back property of people's houses, and people are not going there. It's kind of difficult to go in there if you're not don't have waiters and stuff. And um, so they definitely take the opportunity to hide and pick the plants when the season is right, because they eat. I mean, they're basically masters of the outdoors. They know everything they can eat and not, and so they're definitely eating a lot more things than what we think. And but they definitely steal our food. There's a lot of reports of that, and I think they sometimes maybe get a little curious to what we're cooking, and it smells good. So I think if you're camping, you could have an opportunity of reeling one in with the food you have, just like any other animals,
Mm-hmm.
So before all the pandemic happened, like we were talking about earlier, there was a lot of stuff planned here in Michigan and throughout the Bigfoot community. It kind of got put on halt, and unfortunately, we lost about 2 good months of going out and researching. Hopefully, that doesn't hurt the community, but I think it also is going to help in a way, because it's going to give a lot of our puts a fire under us. So we really want to go out there now, and so hopefully in the next few months we actually start getting more evidence as a result of being stuck inside. Everyone gets the fever of going out, so hopefully actually get a boost, which I think will help.
Yeah. Well, I think it actually might be better because they're showing worldwide that now that people are staying in place and they're staying indoors, wildlife is returning to cities, to there's towns that are being overtaken by deer populations. So it's like, where did the humans go?
Yeah,
And
maybe the same thing will happen to Bigfoot.
yeah, maybe the curiosity factor, they're going to venture out of their their known territories to see what's going on. Of why am I not hearing humans in the woods? Where have the humans gone? So that gives the possibility of more evidence to find, of tracks and maybe hair analysis, stuff like that. So it's a give and a take. It's for us it's a give, because we have to stay indoors, and we only go outside to sun ourselves and take the dog for a walk. But it's a take because it's going to be interesting to see when we do go back out into the woods and stuff like that, what evidence people are going to be finding.
Yeah, and I think might have some Bigfoot slipping up, and with everyone having extra fire under them, that trying to get evidence, it might help compound the factor of finding stuff. Because it is hard to get evidence of these creatures. I mean, I've had a few encounters, but I wasn't real prepared. And then, of course, I went out about it was probably the month before all this quarantine happened, so February. I was filming, and literally I turned away 30 seconds, and I had my two buddies seen something, and it only takes like half a second, 10 seconds to turn away, and then boom, you missed a full shot of evidence of getting something on video. So it's very hard, even in the moment, to get stuff.
Yeah. Now you had said that during one of your encounters you had a bluff charge. I know from dealing with, because I do hiking, and I do travel writing, and I go to different destinations, and one of those destinations is always Ely, Minnesota, where my mom works, and she works with black bears, so I know all about bluff charges, and what to expect from a black bear that's doing a bluff charge. But what was your encounter like?
Well, it wasn't really a bluff charge. So basically what happened was I was 13 years old, I would say, 13 or 14. It was in the springtime, and it was full moon was not out, but it was bright enough that I could see with the moon. And basically I was in the countryside, and I would start my night research by hitting up the side woods we had in the yard, adjusting my eyes to the darkness. I would cross the road, and there would be a gravel pit in the corner, and go around that, and I'd hit up this brushy area, work my way up to harder woods, and then to the swamp area, and really dense portion of woods. So I had a little routine going, but this particular night I decided to cross the road and just go to the gravel pit. And so I crossed the road, and within about 20 steps or so, I heard something on my side of the road where I would have been, and I thought it was a deer, because I had jumped dozens and dozens of deer at night, and a few other animals. So I wasn't really worried about anything. I was just starting out. So I walked about another 20 paces, and I heard it again. So I was like, I thinking it was a deer again. So I made a low whoop, and basically it's only like 100 or 200 yard call. Very, very soft, very low. So it's not call blasting. It's the opposite. So I listened and heard nothing. So I walked another 20 steps. And then all of a sudden I heard a burst of commotion, and I heard this individual come down the embankment, and I heard it cross the road in 3 steps. And I was shocked. I was frozen at that point, because it was on 2 legs, and it happened so fast. But basically, it crossed the road in 3 steps. It jumped over a branch. I landed into some water, a flooded thicket, and it dashed towards me. And it was pretty fast. It was on 2 legs. It all took, not even 10 seconds, I would say. But the dash, it was in the water, and it stopped about 20 to 30 feet from me in the thicket. I could see the thicket's moving, but I could not see it. And so I basically put my walking stick up, and I stood there for 2 minutes. About 2 minutes, I would say, yeah. And I was honestly waiting for this thing to get me. The first 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then I was just, then it was like, I got to get out of here, got to get home. So I got the nerve, and I walked up to the gravel pit. I was going to go down the road back to the house. I'm only 200 yards from my house. And I decided it would probably better if I went around the bushes, through the brush. I was thinking I could hear it if it was, going to come after me more. So I decided to go around, and my head was on a swivel the entire time, and I got into my door, opened the door, and I didn't see nothing else that night. So it wasn't a bluff charge, but it dashed towards me.
So now that happened when you were 13. What other encounters have you had throughout the years?
So over the years, at that property, I've had a few things thrown at me. Me and my brother heard distant whoops and stuff in the morning, waiting for the bus. Moved around, and in Battle Creek, there was one time where I seen some red eye shine, and it was very weird. It looked like a light, right? And that's what I thought it was. And I just walked over there, and it blinked, and then it went away. And that property out in Battle Creek was had a swamp in it, so it was kind of weird. And there's a lot of creepy paranormal stuff happening inside the house and outside. So it is pretty crazy. But different times, I would hear it out in Battle Creek. I would hear wood knocking and calls, and then moved around again. And then I was working in an area that I'm working now, but close by, I was working in this area, and I was setting up camp, and I hear all of a sudden I'm trying to get a fire going. I can't. All of a sudden I hear a massive tree break, and it's 50 feet away. And I hear, and I jump up, and I'm like, what the heck was that? And I heard something, but I didn't experience nothing that night. Next morning, I camped out that night. Next morning, I looked over there, and the branch that was broken off the tree was like the size of my leg.
Oh wow!
It was clean and stuff, and I didn't think they liked me out there doing that. But I kept working that property, and I would hear an owl call, but it sounded like a 500-pound owl, and it sounded like a barn owl, and it wouldn't do the full sequence of the calls, though. It would only do half the sequence. And I, one time it was very close, and I ran up towards it, and I didn't see nothing, and I didn't see no owl fly away. But a couple months later, I was coyote hunting, and I seen a possum come up, and it was way too close for my rifle was sighted into, so I missed it. And so I'm like, dang. And about a minute later, I heard the neighbor yelling at me. And I was like, why is the neighbor yelling at me? We're in the country. It's, shooting coyotes, everything's legal, legit, everything's good. Done it plenty of times before. I heard it again. I'm like, man, some don't sound right. I heard it a third time, and it sounded like a mumbling caveman or something. He was yelling at me, and he was over by the neighbor's house, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, I was in shock. And then I heard a female started talking to him. She sounded feminine. You could tell it was feminine compared to him. And it was kind of like this samurai chatter, kind of fluty sounding with tones. And they were talking, and they walked down the wood line closer towards me. And I was in shock because I was hearing them, and I was like, what in the heck is going on? And the female was like making some chirping sounds or fluttering chirping sounds. So they kept, walking towards the wood line, and they went silent. And, 15 minutes later, I got creeped out. Because you could almost feel them like they're right there. They walked up 100 yards from me, and then they got quiet. So I went inside, and that was a pretty fantastic experience. I really wish I would have had my gear out. This was before I bought my new camera and all that, and I was coyote hunting, so I wasn't expecting a Bigfoot encounter. But that was the greatest vocal encounter I've had by far, compared to any whoop or anything. It'll set you back, and you'll definitely be confused when you first start hearing it.
Yeah, that's one of the best thing. Well, with everybody being at home now, unless you're essential, I've been telling people that if you're into the Bigfooting and you really want to up your game, go outside, especially during this time of year, and just sit and watch the different birds. Mm-hmm. And make a note of what birds make what calls and what it actually sounds like. Because when you're in the woods and everything goes quiet, and suddenly you start hearing these bird songs that don't quite, it sounds like a bird, but it's just slightly off. There's something not, right about it. Then if you know what your bird calls are and what the local birds are, then you can determine whether, okay, am I actually hearing birds, or is this a Bigfoot mimicking a bird call and it's alerting others to my presence? And if you can know what the actual sounds of the birds are and what their calls are and which birds make them, then it kind of gives you more information when you're out in the woods and you start hearing bird calls and you're like, no, I don't think that type of bird comes this deep into the woods. What is that? It's just a little detective work you can start doing.
And that's what I did. I when I heard that owl mimicry, first thing I went inside and I watched hundreds of different videos of owl calls and narrowed it down, and it just didn't sound right because it didn't do the full sequence of the barred owl of how they hoot. And the place I'm at now, researching for 6 years now, I've heard multiple woodknocks a few different times. I've got them actually on video on my YouTube. It's the Lost Cryptids Conservatory, and I've had multiple woodknocks around me, and there was basically guns going off. I was on the trail. It was after a long day in the woods, and I thought, I had heard something, but I wasn't for sure. And I was taking the trail back to get to the parking lot, and there's gunshots going off, and all of a sudden there's a gunshot going off, and it's behind me, and there's a woodknock up to, it was like a square. It was, one corner, and then all of a sudden another corner, another corner, another corner. It was all around me. And it was rapid. It was in, 10 seconds of each other. And it wasn't an echo of the gun or anything. And I was like, wow, and they were around me. There's been a study from, who is it? A group did a study for the Bigfoot Field magazine, or it's a Bigfoot magazine. I'm butchering it, but basically they did a woodknock test of different woods and materials of how far away wood knock is compared to where you hear it. And they did a percussion block and everything. And they found that if you hear wood knocks, it's actually a lot closer to you than what you think. You think it's off in the distance. It's actually a lot closer to you. But when I had that encounter, it sounded like they were real close, like just 50 to 100 yards over a ridge, or 100 yards in the swamp. You go look over there, you can't see nothing. They're crouching down, and the vegetation is so lush. So I've had a number of encounters. I got wood knocks on video during the winter. If you go to my video, the Lost Cryptids Conservatory Evidence of 2019, it was some of the better stuff I got, including going out with my buddy James to the Waterloo area. It's a massive state lane area. I think it's 25,000 plus acres of wilderness and trails. A lot of sightings in there. And we, the one particular time in that video, we had locals made, and they had followed us. At one point, they had sounded like they were on all sides of us, making calls. And we had something thrown at us, and that's on camera. I filmed it. I'm filming myself and him. We're talking, and we point out where we start hearing stuff, and all of a sudden, I slow it down and stuff because you can see our micro expressions. Our eyes literally, our micro level change body positions as we hear the rock being thrown in real time, or whatever is thrown. It crashes through the trees. So I caught that on video. And that was an amazing time. I got audio. They barked at us. They whooped at us. They, I don't know, a possible infrasound or some sort of thing was caught, and it messes my camera up for a second.
Yeah, infrasound will do that. I've had experiences with being hit with infrasound, and the effects that it has on the human body is very interesting. At the time that we were hit with it, none of us had any of our equipment on, so we didn't really register that anything on our equipment. But it was a group of 11 people, and it was actually a ghost lion that hit us with a wave of infrasound as his roar. Because one of the claims of the location is this is the haunted theater in Howell, Michigan, and if you go behind the screens, there is a loft halfway up, from the ceiling, and that's where they say that the ghost lion likes to nap, and if you disturb him, the other ghosts have told researchers that through EVP work that the lion gets very grumpy if he's woken up from his naps. And so here these 11 people come, walking through there, and all of us just got this like heaviness in our chest, like we were having an anxiety attack. And it was so, powerful. And then like 10 minutes later, everybody was feeling these really like sore muscle like spasms in the back of their shoulders, and so the infrasound had moved through us, and that was the end result. It took everybody about a half an hour to get back to feeling like, air quotation mark, normal. So it was if a ghost lion can do that, I can only imagine what, like, being hit by like a real animal or a Bigfoot with their infrasound would be.
Yeah, my buddy Chad Datema thinks that's more EMF. It's more of that than because infrasound is a frequency, and it could be electrical. So he thinks it's more of like an electrical pulse that they do to the equipment and stuff. Because we've experienced some technical difficulties of the cameras just all of a sudden we're filming and it just stops midway and glitching out or something, and He's been I've never been EMF, I don't think, or infrasound. There was one time I felt like I needed to get out of an area, and I filmed it, and I actually filmed what I couldn't see anything, but I was hearing footsteps right in front of me, and I got followed out of the area by things I couldn't see, but I was hearing footsteps, and I was pointing the camera right there. I mean, I walked up on it. It was 10 feet from me. Couldn't hear nothing. It was still walking around, and he thinks that they EMF you, and he's been EMF or infrasound, and he felt very nauseous and sick, and almost one time, he had to be carried out of the woods because he thought he was having a heart attack, and so it could be some serious stuff, I guess. Another time when I was with Chad and James in Chad's area, they started feeling very anxious and weird in a particular area that he calls the nesting area. And shortly, a couple minutes after, they had seen an individual in the woods. I was filming the very area 30 seconds before, and literally take my camera off, and they see it. I turn back to it, and I walk up to there, and I find a track 10 feet away from the tree they seen it. And pretty good track, in my opinion. We didn't cast it. It was very muddy. We didn't have the material. But they went back the next couple days or whatever, and to do a comparison, because Chad's 6'8". He's pretty tall, so he's a great tape measure out there. And they first, I asked them separately, what they see, what color, all this, and it was black, and it was standing up, and then it kind of crouched and dashed out of the way real fast. And they both thought it was, around 5 to 6 feet, not too terribly tall. But when they went out there, and Chad went there, it was actually in a little hole, not a hole, but the landscape dropped down, so it was actually much bigger than they thought, and it was much taller than Chad.
Oh,
when
wow.
they did the comparison photos and stuff.
Yeah, that it helps when you have somebody that has that, almost 7 foot tall height to them to do that comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, because it helps, because they were thinking, it wasn't, I'm 6 foot, it wasn't as much bigger than me is what they were saying, but it was a lot bigger. So, and a lot taller than Chad. So I think, they had seen something. The area, Chad has had a lot of activity in there. And so we're researching it. We were before the pandemic. We've had, we were gifting in the area, and had some interesting findings of them taking 5 apples or leaving 5 apples. And they would take apples off these branches that are very small, that if a raccoon got up there, it'd break. They take every single apple without breaking the branches. And one time we hung up a little rock, and they broke that branch and left the rock still hung to the branch, and they tossed that branch aside. But every other branch with the apple was not broken.
Yeah, I've heard different reports with the gifting, but and I can't remember who did it. You might know them, but they had put up peanut butter jars as traps, and when they came, they had left it in the morning, and when they came back to their tent, there was peanut butter smeared all over their tent because the Bigfoot was angry that I'm assuming it was angry because it got this stuff all over its fingers, and it decided to leave a prank of its own on the person who was doing the researching. I can't remember.
Yeah, they think.
Can't remember who.
Oh, God.
Because it was at one of the West Branch Bigfoot days, and I can't remember what researcher it was who had done that, but he said, yeah, I decided to do the peanut butter trap, so I hung it from the tree and went out, for a couple hours to go investigate, and he had left left his tent up, and I think his dog was actually in his tent in a crate. And when he came back, the dog was freaking out, and then he started noticing peanut butter marks all over his tent, like something was wiping its fingers or its hand on his tent to get the peanut butter off.
Yeah, I can't remember the person who that story is from, because we hear dozens of stories each and every week. If you're researching all the time and listening, and there's a lot of great researchers here in Michigan. A lot of people who are kind of well known and known locally, and people who are just so far on the radar, but are known in our little circles. We all got some pretty good evidence and encounters all around Michigan, and this year and stuff. I know I had set up some stuff with Chad and a big expedition, and I know like Chuck, he was doing his Bigfoot conference and stuff. He's still has everything planned as long as everything doesn't freak out with the pandemic more.
Yeah, I'm going to be presenting at that.
Yeah, you're going to be there. We had we had a bunch of stuff planned. A bunch of us, our researchers, Chuck and a bunch of people had planned to do a bunch of things the last 2 months, and it's just so funny how everything got set aside because of this virus and stuff.
Yeah, and especially because Michigan, we're kind of unique because we're surrounded on all sides except for the bottom part of the state by water, so we really get the lake effect weather with the snow and storms and stuff like that. And so when spring hits, it's like, oh yes, we get to go outside, we get to go back to living. And it seems like from December to like beginning of March, everybody's in hibernation mode, and nobody's doing anything. It's like we go to work, we come home, that's it. Because it gets dark at 4:30 in the afternoon and doesn't get light until probably 7 o'clock in the morning. Right. We really look forward to the spring, summer, and fall when we can get out and do our investigations and go to different events. And now it's just kind of like another month of this.
Yeah, and some people they say, or like they'll have a particular like March, middle of March, these last 2 weeks, I have to be in this area. I think they're going to be there. They, practically missed it unless they're right. Going out. I mean, I have been going out and stuff, but I'm going out with my buddies and stuff. Until things are a little bit cooled off. I got family and stuff. I got little kids, and
yeah.
So don't want to take any too much chances, but you can still get out, by yourself and get out there. But hopefully, I know that when this is all done, a lot of researchers are going to be getting out there and getting some good stuff. And I'm working with a bunch of people. We all are. I think a lot of us want Michigan to kind of be more well known for Bigfooting because it's kind of like a hidden little gem. We're like, we're in the top 5, top 6, 7 of foot sightings, depending on the year or what source you get from, and so we're up there. The state that has the most Bigfoot sightings. We're actually pretty up there.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah, from the different statistics that I've seen over the years, we rank right up there with the state of Washington and Oregon of sightings, and we're actually
that's right.
we're actually, if you draw a line across the states, Michigan and Washington are actually, climate-wise, we're about the same. We get the same type of weather. We're in the same climate zone. So, we have just as much activity, and we get the same amount of rain. We get the same amount of growing time. So we do get a lot of the activity. Now, the Bigfoots out on the West Coast might be a little bit different than what the behavior here is in Michigan, but we have
Oh yeah, yeah,
quite a abundance of activity.
yeah. They definitely act different in different parts of the country. I don't know if there's different like subspecies or whatever. I think they're more of I'm tending to lead towards they're more of a human than ape, whether or not they're a hominin, but more human of origin. Um, Maybe they are very sophisticated and have their own tribes and languages, and they obviously do. They can communicate, but more or less like a structured civilization of conducting themselves, I guess, um, is what I'm leaning towards because of if because it seems like they have if they're an ape, you would think they'd slip up so much more. If they're more animalistic, they would slip up a bit more. Even if they were a caveman, I think we would have a body, we would have more evidence. If you're a person and you have that such high intellect and your sophistication and communication with your groups, then it's a lot easier for you to hide and to teach your young ones to hide and to not make some mistakes. And some people, where they ask, where do they go to? They disappear in portals. I don't think they disappear in portals. I think they just are such in tune with the environment that they slip away.
Yeah.
And they sleep in some rugged spots. And some people, I'm leaning towards now, is they sleep inside in the pockets of rivers, like otters and alligators. They make a nest up underneath the shelves of the river, just like an otter. There's a famous European author of the green men and the trolls and ogres that live underneath bridges and underneath water shelves. And so that's a possibility I'm leaning towards because, they disappear in water and or around swamps all the time. And you wouldn't want to, I wouldn't think of Sasquatch as actually sleeping in the water full time. I mean, maybe a nap or two, but, if you're in the water sleeping, you would develop some pretty bad skin conditions. So I think they slide up in
But
underneath the river
but that could also
to stay dry
explain that
and
could
hidden.
that could also,
Because we don't have many caves here in Lower Michigan. And they have to get out of the elements somehow.
right. But if they are exposed to water, especially like swamp water or something like that, that could explain, the description that people give of them smelling like they have this like skunky smell to them, with if there's an algae or a mold growing on their fur, that would explain that smell that some people are smelling.
Yeah, they're wet or wet dog smell. I think I'm leaning towards that because it's a great way that most people aren't diving underneath a river, looking underneath
Right.
the side of the river, trying to find a big hole for a Bigfoot. But there are a lot of tales from Europe and Native American legends of different creatures that live in the water and passages inside rivers that lead, different places inside the earth. I think it's interesting. I think it's something to definitely take note of, of the possibility. Because everything, until we, start proving everything as fact, I think it's good to take note.
Yeah.
Maybe even some of the woo side, just because if you ever come across it, you have a reference of what is going on.
Yeah, I think you can't dismiss any portion of research because until we actually do have a living, breathing specimen of the species, in a controlled setting where you can see what their behavior is, how they interact with things, then you really can't discount anything behavior wise because nobody knows. People who claim that they are a absolute expert on it, I kind of question because without a living, breathing animal to actually you know, observe and study, you can't really make any findings. And, you know, even if there was a dead
Exactly.
body,
Yep.
even if there was a dead body, you'd be able to take certain measurements, certain details of, you know, height, bone density, you know, what their diet was, what their hair follicles look like, what their DNA sequence is. Um, and you could make, you know, research, you know, details from that. But until there's an actual, you know, specimen recovered, you know, we're kind of, you know, we're all asking the same questions, and everybody's getting different answers.
Yeah, and even if we got a body and that all that, it's not going to give us the full story. We actually need like a Jane Goodall moment of actual people in the field having interaction, filming of
Yes.
what they do in the wild. That is the only way we can determine exactly what they're able to do and what they do, because a body can only tell us so much, and it's not going to tell us their social patterns, their
Right.
social habits, what they're
So
actually doing out there, besides what they're
you,
eating.
yeah, you'd
But
actually
like
have
how
to
they,
have a group of them
you know,
that
we
are
need that Jane
living.
Goodall moment of that interaction,
Yeah.
and for it to be filmed. That's the real when I think we'll find all the answers. Um, but you hear so many stories about how they, you know, they're intelligent enough that they're communicating. You know, my experience is they were definitely talking to each other, and I don't know if it was a native language or their own language, but it sounded like a mumbling caveman
Right.
and a feminine, fluty woman talking to each other. You know, distinctly. And he was mad. They were arguing. He was mad. I think he wanted to come over and show me who was the boss, and she was telling him no. You know, because they were arguing. They were getting close. So to me, they're very intelligent, and that's more than an ape. To have an argument like that, it seems, you know, like your average couple would be arguing, bickering, and not like an ape, you know, grunting and pushing and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, throwing a big tantrum and not communicating as effectively with each other.
Yeah,
So,
there,
yeah,
you know, there's so many questions left unanswered out there that uh,
there is.
it's
Uh,
all up for, you know, speculation. But you know, the more research that people do, the more evidence that's found, the more experiences and encounters that people report, the more we can form a better picture of what the actual species of the Bigfoots, you know, the Sasquatches, around the world, these big bipedal, you know, primates, of what they're actually doing. And, you know, I think that every little bit of evidence and research helps.
I think so. And, you know, there are a lot of other things out in these woods than just Sasquatch. You know, there's a lot of reports of Dogman, but there's ghosts, there's UFOs, there's um, other creatures like the rake. I seen what I called the stick man, but it was basically like the rake. This was before the term was made, and it was a humanoid, 7-foot humanoid looking at me. He was bald, naked. Give me a very fast lay down of it because I know we don't have too much time, but it looked like the guy from Lord of the Rings. After the ring, he's that goblinoid humanoid.
Oh,
What's his name?
Gollum. Smeagol
Yes,
Gollum. Yes.
it looked. Yes, it looked exactly like that, except for it was about 7 foot tall, and its arms were so skinny that at the time, being it was I was a teenager. I think I was like 16, 17. And I was feeling pretty tough, and I felt like I could go up to that creature and break its arm over my knee like a stick. It was very skinny, very creepy. My dad actually ended up seeing it. You know, went inside, told my dad to go out there, and he lied, said he didn't see it. And 2 years ago, he told me, "Hey, you remember that stick man you guys seen?" And he told me the real story, and he had actually went out there and did see it, and it was tree peaking, like it did with us, and it was showing itself more and more, like it did with me and my friend. And my dad thought about grabbing a shotgun and going back out there. He's kind of old school, and he decided that he didn't want to scare me and my brother because we had just moved there and my mom had passed away, and he worked late. He didn't want us coming home from school and worrying about the stick man and other creatures out there besides Bigfoot, because I was full blown Bigfoot, and he didn't care about that, but what he had seen, he didn't want to tell us because he didn't want us worrying. So there are other things out there, and people need to be aware of. And
yeah, I would love to do another podcast interview with you about
that was a very very fast story of it, but
because we're coming up on an hour, and I do have to get to another podcast interview. So, but I would love to talk to you.
A few more counters I have, I could tell definitely, and it's a great subject to talk about.
Yeah,
and, it's always nice to talk about it with the people who are very knowledgeable, like yourself.
Yeah, I enjoy my cryptid cryptozoology conversations a lot, because that's my major field of interest, and that's what I like to pursue, is cryptozoology. But I want to thank you for coming on to the show, and I definitely want to have you back on a future episode to talk more cryptids. And thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, and I would love to come on. Just let me know.
Okay.
Course, and,
okay, I will definitely do that.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for everyone who's listening.